Hello, my name is Claire Williamson, and I am Deputy Director at ArtsBoston. I use she, her pronouns, and for a quick visual description, I am a white woman with long brown hair and glasses, wearing a white turtleneck and sitting in front of a colorful quilt. I'm thrilled to be speaking with Boston Lyric Opera's artistic director, Nina Yoshida Nelsen, about the Rising Waters, Rising Voices initiative and how climate action and education are playing a role at BLO this season and beyond. Nina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I also use she, her pronouns, and a little description of me. Uh, uh, my hair is curly, wavy, if you will, a little longer than my shoulders. I'm half Japanese, middle-aged woman.
Well, to get us started, Nina, I'd love to just kind of have an intro to the Rising Waters, Rising Voices initiative and how this project came about for BLO.
Yeah, I think BLO, we are an opera company, but more than that, we are a nonprofit community organization. And we are here for the community of Boston. And so not only is it important for us to be telling operatic stories, but it is also equally important for us to be stories that matter to the community. And so because this is so important to us, we're always looking for ways that we can create impact beyond what we put on our main stage. And that comes in the way of education or community engagement. It also comes in the way of learning along with our community. And that's something that we're really pride ourselves on. At BLO, we are not always the people who hold all the knowledge. Sometimes we are people who want to be learning about other subjects. And so that's how Rising Waters, Rising Voices really came to be. In the past seasons, we've done things like the butterfly process, where we took a deep dive into Madame Butterfly and some of the problematic aspects that come along with producing an opera like Madame Butterfly, especially among our Asian American community. And we looked at things that were problematic, and then we talked about them publicly, learning about them, and then talked about how we can create impact and change through the work we're doing. And so that's kind of how Rising Waters, Rising Voices came up. The butterfly process was um, such an impactful and rewarding experience for so many people, both in the community, in our company, and amongst the artist community, that we thought this is really something that we can learn from it and draw from in order to create impact with other subject matter as well.
Wow, that's wonderful. And really interesting to hear kind of this development of different learning opportunities and explorations that kind of have sparked interest with your team. Um, I'd love to kind of talk specifically about some of the onstage work that's happening as part of the initiative. So, of course, the first anchor is The Seasons, which premieres March 12th. I'm super excited for it. And I'm curious sort of what to you made this project a good fit for the initiative and what kind of came first in this instance? Was it the art piece itself or the theme? Did you encounter Anthony's work and see that it fit, or was it sort of you were looking for climate work?
Um, you know, we encountered Anthony and Sarah's work first, and it was something that just felt like it was a story that needed to be told, and it needed to be told now. And because of that, that is how we were able to think bigger than just the work, right? We spend so much time talking about our main stage and what our main stage is, but really, there's only 5 performances of the seasons and then it's gone. So what can we take with all of the resources we're putting into something like the seasons, and how can we make that bigger than just 5 nights in the theater? And so while we were talking with Anthony and Sarah and Zach Winokur, who's the director, that was what inspired us to think bigger. However, this project, they've been working on it for 5 years now. And it's something that is really incredible in that it takes music by Vivaldi, which was written, 300 years ago. It's not very often you get to say, "Hey, I'm doing a world premiere of Vivaldi."
Yeah.
But what they did is they took a pastiche. They made a pastiche, which is like a mix and match of a lot of different things from Vivaldi pieces, including Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which is perhaps his most famous piece. And you've heard it in commercials and movies, and you'll hear the music and be like, "Oh, that okay, I get that." And so they took music from the Four Seasons, but also other operas, and took arias, which are solo songs, and ensembles, and wrote a new libretto. And this libretto is about artists who are experiencing weather. And the question comes up of how does weather make us feel? And I think this was a really important question for the creative team, that oftentimes we talk about weather, talk about climate, talk about all this stuff, but what are the feelings that are involved in it? And when we feel, we care, right? And so this was something that was really, really important, is like, how do we talk about feelings when it comes to something like the weather? And so together with the team, we've been, working on this for over a year now, and coming up with this incredible production. And we've got a brilliant cast, and we've got an equally brilliant creative team who have come up with a concept that is, really, it's going to be really unique in that in opera we have it's a very resource heavy industry.
Mhm.
We've got huge sets, lots of costumes, and so this team was tasked with, how can we create a production that, where we're talking about the environment, that does not create a lot of negative impact on the environment. And so you'll actually come and you'll see it, and there's not a lot of actual physical set materials. The question was, how do we create something that is visually impactful without being, too impactful on the environment? And um, we're working with a PhD student at MIT in the Media Lab, and he's come up with great concepts, along with Mimi Lien, who is our scenic designer, to work with bubbles. And so bubbles will be on the stage, soap, uh, depicting different types of weather and weather events. And you'll never believe the different all sorts of, when you think like outside the box, rather than just, a circular bubble that you're blowing through a wand, how many different ways you can use soap films to create different types of weather. And so you'll see, maybe for the first time ever on stage, I don't know, bubbles in so many different forms, that are depicting the weather. And then what
Mhm.
happens when you get rid of the bubbles is they're gone, right? They evaporate, they disappear. And so the impact on the environment is really, negligible.
Yeah.
So I think this whole production was really what inspired us. Like, how can we think bigger than just the art that will be on our stage for 5 days, when it comes to the city of Boston and beyond? And that's really how Rising Waters, Rising Voices came to be.
Yeah. I'm also just thinking about the positive implications for taking this piece elsewhere and not thinking about having to recreate a huge set, and or tour a large
Yeah,
accoutrement.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, well, when you think of like some like Broadway productions, right, and all the trucks that it takes on their national
Right.
tours to bring the set along, and it won't be that way for this project. But that's something, as a company, another thing that we're doing, along with all of the work, both on our main stage and our, community engagement and conversations and learning, is we also are working with the Green Ribbon Commission here in Boston, and developing a climate action plan for our company. And
Mhm.
that's definitely something that we're thinking of when we are thinking about like what are our long-term goals as a company, is when we're thinking about, having co-productions, what does that look like? What does it look like as we're sharing resources with different companies? And how can that be part of a plan to help create positive impact on the climate?
Yeah, I think it's so important as well I'm glad you brought up the climate action plan because I think, people often aren't thinking, like you said, about how resource heavy a lot of theater is, but opera in particular, and how it's not just necessarily the physical space, it's everything else that's going into each individual production that's happening throughout a
Mhm.
season. Yeah, of
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because we want everything to be visually different, right? So it's
course.
it's hard to reuse things over and over again. Our audience comes because they want to see something that's visually stimulating. And so that's part of the conversation, is how do we create visually stimulating things, and maybe not always have it be such a resource heavy art.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to pivot and talk a little bit about Noah's Flood, which is kind of the other performance anchor in the initiative. And this is such a cool community-based project, which is coming May 3rd, including young singers and musicians. What was the process like to bring this piece to life in particular?
Yeah, so our music director, David Angus, it's his 15th season with us this year, and he has been wanting to do this piece for a very long time. And we finally felt like this was the year to do it. And it's a piece that was written by Benjamin Britten, and it was written after a flood ruined his town. And this was art in response to this flood and the devastation that this flood created. And it's a story that's based on Noah's Ark. And so it was written originally for the community to perform. It's not something that was written for, a big opera company. And this was written specifically with community in mind. And so in some ways, it's going to be the most ambitious thing we've ever done, because what we're doing is we are, the host organization, and this is our show. But really, there are only two professional opera singers that are in this opera. And everything else is going to be done and told by the community. And so the majority of the community that is being brought in for this project are all kids, which is what the piece was really written for. And so we have, hundreds, literally hundreds of kids from multiple community organizations that are coming together to put this piece on May 3rd at Symphony Hall. We've got Boston Children's Chorus, Voices Boston, NEC Prep, Boston String Academy, Community Music Center of Boston, the Back Bay Ringers, which is a handbell chorus,
Right.
and the Boston Recorder Orchestra, excuse me. And so
Amazing.
we've got all of these community organizations who are all coming together to create art together. And it's especially impactful in times like now, where there's a lot of hurt in the world. And so how can we come together as a community and create art together as a community? I think is a really important important question to ask. And actually, our season theme, in between both the seasons and Noah's Flood, is carousel. And so our whole season's theme is "You'll Never Walk Alone," and that really fits into this idea of Noah's Flood as well. Is
Yeah.
like, how can we keep encouraging and creating community around art? And we'll really see that. But it's going to be a really exciting short process. Dayron Miles, who's the, I think, associate artistic director of ART,
Mhm.
is directing it, and it's going to be a week-long event of rehearsals for us with one morning where we put it all together and then we perform it that afternoon. And so, for an opera company, where normally we're rehearsing things for 3 or 4 weeks before we put something on stage, this is, it feels very stressful for me, but I think it's going to be really exciting. And, we have all of these other community organizations have really, stepped up and said, yes, we're here. We will do this. We're excited to do this. And, it's gonna be really incredible.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I'm just reflecting on, I'm so moved by the theme of the season being You'll Never Walk Alone. I agree. I feel like that is such a timely, I mean, it's always a powerful sentiment, but especially in this day and age. And also just the opportunity for you all at BLO to be celebrating all of these other community groups as well. It's that idea of everyone is kind of operating in their own lane, and each organization is doing really great work, but to come together, amplifying the impact, and just what an amazing celebration of art and community and learning. It's really wonderful to hear about.
Yeah, and the BSO has graciously given us their space to host this event. And I think something that we've all kind of learned coming out of the pandemic is how important it is to work together. And you're right in that there have often been each of us in our own lanes or silos of opera over here, theater over here, ballet over here. But we're also with a new group of leadership in arts organizations in Boston, and it's really exciting to talk about how we can work together to come together and create art all together. And I forgot to mention also Arts Emerson is partnering with us on presenting the seasons as well. So it's something that is really important to us as an organization, is looking beyond ourselves and our little world of opera, and how can we work together to create something bigger than just us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just I love hearing as well from your perspective that this generation of arts leadership in Boston is also really committed to that cross collaboration as well. So Rising Waters, Rising Voices was announced in the fall. And so I'd love to hear from you what your takeaways are so far from leading the project, internal conversations, learnings, reflections that have been sparked within the team up to now.
Yeah, so I also sort of co-led the butterfly process a couple years ago, but
Mhm.
that's really my jam, if you will. I've performed in 200 Madame Butterflies. I've done a lot of work with the Asian American community, and done a lot of work on Madame Butterfly. And then all of a sudden we were like, okay, let's do Rising Waters, Rising Voices. And I right away said, um, I don't know how to talk about climate or climate change,
Yeah.
and it was really scary to me. And it was I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to learn. If I want to speak about this publicly, I also have to learn. But I was working with I had a consulting couple hours with a great group called Groundwater Arts, and they work with climate and art, and how art and climate can work together, and we can tell the story. And I said to them, I said, I don't know how to talk about this. And they said, yes, you do. You have lived experience with it every day. You just talk about what you live, and how that is part of your life and your children, and what you want this world to be like for your children. And they said that sometimes that's the biggest obstacle, it feels like it's just such a big topic, and it feels so overwhelming, and it feels like there's nothing that any one person can do. But that's part of the narrative that needs to change. And so for me personally, in learning, it's been incredible because I've also been, having conversations with scientists at WHOI and at Boston Harbor Now, and all of these other local organizations who are doing the work. And for me, it feels really exciting to be able to uplift them and to bring them into the conversation. But it's been fascinating because a lot of these people say it's not a science problem, it's a storytelling problem. And you know what? What we do as arts organizations, we tell stories. And so it just makes so much sense to bring, science and storytelling together. And we've been working with the city of Boston and, all of these different organizations who are doing climate work in different ways. And what we are able to do is we're able to uplift them and help tell that story. And so for me personally, and I think for a lot of our company and people who have been on this journey, it's that's been a really great eye-opening thing for all of us, is that we all in different ways can affect change. And it doesn't always have to be directly through being a scientist who's working on this, or being a mathematician who's working on this, or whatever. It's bigger than all of us, but it's also something that we all can find little ways here and there to create impact and change. And sometimes all that is bringing awareness to the subject, and that's okay too. But that's the first step, right? Is awareness, and that it's not as overwhelming as it sometimes can feel. And I was talking with Annalisa Diaz, who's one of the founders of Groundwater Arts, and she has this fabulous um, uh, saying that I had just, every time she says it, I get chills. And she says often, it's not a climate crisis, it's a crisis of imagination. And that just, the first time she said that, I was like, wait, say that again. She's like, it's not a climate crisis, it's a crisis of imagination. And so, I leave you all with that, but I also bring that with me wherever I go as well. And remember that we each have the ability to imagine a wonderful future, even that if that does include rising waters. What does that future look like, and how can we keep using our own imaginations to think about what a future looks like?
Yeah. Well, that is, I think, the perfect place to end this conversation. Nina, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. We at Arts Boston are passionate about celebrating climate action work happening in our community. And really, like we were saying, now more than ever, it's so important for us to amplify this community-based work that's serving to make our region more sustainable, resilient, connected, imaginative. So to learn more about Rising Waters, Rising Voices, and to reserve your tickets to the seasons and to Noah's Flood, please visit the links in the video description, or you can head to blo.org/rising. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.